You do need to sign the release first. Names, images, likenesses.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank the Moscow Ale House for bringing us Vandal brats and helping us with an assortment of beer. So thank you, Moscow Ale House. That was really great. And before we get started, I have several members in the audience that are a part of the Moscow Arts Commission. And there's also Aaron with Special Collections at the University of Idaho. There's Maureen here. A lot of people helped out. DJ is here, my arts assistant, with putting this collection together and putting it on display in the gallery. And it was a lot of time and a lot of work. And as much as we see out here that athletics has delivered, there's 3 times more. So one thing we did find out from starting this little exhibit is athletics has a lot of history and they have a lot of really great things. So hopefully we'll preserve those things and start working on their collection. So with that, I'm going to introduce Iris Mays, who's our chair of the Moscow Arts Commission, and she'll introduce our panel.
Thank you, Kathleen. So we have a small but elite crowd here tonight. This is a great event that we've been working on for a couple of years. And, you know, when we think about football, we think about the athleticism, we think about, going to the games, the tailgating, all of that history. But really, I think the bottom line is relationships. And the city of Moscow and the University of Idaho have been interconnected for a really long time. And so we're just so grateful to have this acknowledgement of the role that athletics plays in sports. And I am personally a big football fan, so I'm really excited to hear from this incredible panel tonight. And I'm going to let Rob Spear introduce our panel. So, you know, we've been lucky to have Rob at the helm here for a while, and so we're grateful to him. So I'll let him make his comments, and just a big round of applause for the panel and our organizers.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm excited about this panel, and I want to thank them for taking time out of their busy schedules to be part of this. And very unique tonight because we have players that played in the 60s through 2016. So we should have great discussion. You're going to learn a lot about really the history of football at the University of Idaho. The first person I'd like to introduce is actually on the phone here, Rich Naccarato. Rich played from 1961 to 1965. He was an all-conference performer. We had a unique experience last weekend. Rich was part of a team that played at Missouri 54 years ago, and we took Rich and Joe Dobson and Mike Monahan on that trip with us, and it was a really neat experience for them, and they got to really look at their past, and it was nice to bring that past into our future. So introducing the rest of our panelists, we have Ryan Phillips. Ryan played from us from 1993 to 97. A tremendous player. Played in the NFL for about 4 or 5 years, Ryan, I think, 5 years. And led the league, our team in sacks for 3 consecutive years. A great player. To his right is Jake Manley. Jake was on our most recent student athlete here, finished his career in 2016. And the thing I like about Jake Manley, always loved, he's an Idaho kid from Riggins, Idaho. He had played with the toughness that the Vandals should have. And he was a kid that was a walk-on. Came to the University of Idaho trying to find an opportunity to earn a scholarship, and he did. And he was a very important piece to our rebuilding process when he played. To my immediate left here is Brian Reeder. Brian was a quarterback for us, and Brian played 2009 to 2011. He went on to play how many years in the Arena League? 3 years in the Arena Football League. So you can see that we have a wide variety of different talents here, and people had different experiences. Brian he came back to school, was a graduate assistant for 2 years, and now is our Director of Football Operations for our football program. To my right, Dick Mooney. Dick played for us 1958 to 1962. Dick had the distinction in 1961 of leading the nation in kickoff returns. And he's one of the few individuals that was a dual sport athlete. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about is, do you think you could even do what you did back then today, given all the demands and the time demands on the student athletes? To Dick's right is Brad Rice. Brad came to the University of Idaho from Lewiston, played on the offensive side for a little bit. They finally figured out he was meant to play on defense, went on the defensive side, and has had a year where he had 201 tackles in 1 year. That's a lot of tackles, and then he had opportunity, I believe, to play with the Giants for a little bit. And Brad is very successful in Lewiston, working as a financial advisor for D.A. Davidson. And then to Brad's right is a person who came back to this area. We're just excited to have him back in Moscow, Idaho, and it's Brian Howard. And Brian played from us from 2001 to 2003. And Brian, you went on to play in the NFL for several years. 3 years?
2.
2 years. We'll call it 3.
Okay. I'm all right with
But
that.
he, wonderful person, wonderful family, going to be a great representative. It's just great to have him back in the community of Moscow. So what I would like to do is have this very interactive. I'd like the audience, when you feel that it's appropriate to ask a question. But one of the things that struck me is we have, again, people played in the 60s in 2016. So I'd just like to, throw it out there about how the sport of football has evolved. And I think I'm going to pick on my guy to the right here because, we've traveled a lot together. Dick comes on a lot of our road trips, and it's been really interesting to hear what football was like when he played, and how they traveled and some of the unique experiences he had. So, Dick, maybe you could start us off here and talk a little bit about the 60s. And then, Rich, when Dick's done, I want you to get ready to pipe in as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I came here in 1958, and at that time, we were in the Pacific Coast Conference, and we had to play both ways. We played both offense and defense, and we could only substitute twice in a half. If you went out the second time in a half, you couldn't come back in until the next half. And at that time, we traveled, like we went to Seattle, we went on a train. We went to both Eugene and Corvallis. We went on a train to Portland and bus down. And we went to Missoula on a train. But then we did go to Army. We got to fly on an airplane. And I think we went to San Jose. The first trip we took on an airplane to San Jose, we went on twin-engine tail draggers, Johnson & Johnson flying service. And I mean, the smoke came up everywhere in the plane. Skip Saley was our coach, and we got off that plane. He says, "We're not flying back on that." But it was a great opportunity, and football was a little different. I mean, you still had to make 10 yards to get a first down, and it was you had to get across the goal line to score, and it was. Football was football. There's just other rules that went along with it.
So today's game, we always have the quarterback, because the story's the best quarterback out there. But when you played, is it true that maybe the best quarterback couldn't be the quarterback because we always had to play a guy on defense, had to play both ways?
No, that rule was you have two guys could be special guys, and it was the quarterback and the punter that you could substitute in and out.
So you just affirm punters were special then, and they're special now.
And we've been very fortunate with our last punters for years. Yeah.
Rich, what do you remember about those days?
That was exactly true. The quarterback and the punter they substituted. They called them a wild card, and it is true that there's a difference. Obviously, when you play both ways. My senior year, we played the last 6 or 8 games of my senior year. We played one way, and at the end of the game, I have to be quite honest with you. It felt like we'd only played half of a game because we had, and it was a very unusual feeling to be restricted and not be able to come in those earlier games. But the best thing about my senior year was the fact that we played Washington State at Moscow and we beat them 23 to something. I don't remember what it was, and they had to walk from the two schools back and forth. That was the best experience that I've ever had as far as the football was concerned.
Yeah. So I'll just turn it over to the other panelists. Maybe Ryan Phillips. Ryan, you played, had a great career in the 90s, played in the NFL. Now you've been around our team for the last 2 years, and Ryan is our not play-by-play, but he's our color commentator with Dennis Patchen, who's doing a wonderful job. But Ryan, what have you seen that's changed since when you played to what you're observing now?
Oh, man. Well, I'll make this quick because I think these two guys next to me could probably speak to this more, because I think there's been, probably the biggest amount of change in the last 10 years. But, and I was talking to Ken Hobart, the Vandal great, the other day, and at one of the volleyball games, and he was telling me that, I never took one snap in shotgun. I was always under center. And you want to make that clear to me because Dennis Patchen had says something about, equating him to the shotgun or something. So he was correcting him. But, I think that's one of the biggest things on offense is that, you see the speed of the game, and it's really too bad for guys like me, because with the offenses now, you see they go up and they have a huge advantage because they go up the line like they're going to run a play. And that threat's always there that they can walk right up and run the play, and the defense kind of has to show a little bit of their hand, right? I mean, they can disguise, but the defense has to go up and line up, and then it allows the offensive coaches to take a look at that defense and then look to the sidelines. They can either go with the play they had called, and if they're not lined up, they can take advantage of that, but they can also then look to the coaches on the sidelines who also have, the eyes up high, and they're communicating, and they can call in a play and take advantage. So I think that's been one of the biggest things that I've seen in the last few years, and it's smart. And it makes you go, you look at all these offenses that run a quarterback in the shotgun now, where they used to be under center, and the quarterback would have to snap the ball, and then he'd have to do fancy footwork and not trip and then stop, and then he would look at the field. And now, it's kind of comical to me that it took so long to figure out. It's one of those, hindsight is 20/20 things, because now, when you put the quarterback in the shotgun, he doesn't have to do all that fancy footwork and getting back. He can see the field and see everything as it is, and it's much better vision and all these things that just seem like, oh, duh, why didn't we do that, 20, 30,
I have to
years
tell
ago?
you that's exactly opposite of what we used to do. DeAndros is the coach that we played for, and his philosophy was, my linemen are bigger than your linemen, and I'm going to kick your butt. And so there's a terrific difference between the offenses of that era and the wide open offenses of this year. And it's a whole lot more exciting, believe me, playing it this way than that way back in the day. But there's a terrific difference. And the comment about being under the center or being in a shotgun deal, in our era, we didn't even know what the shotgun was. So, I mean, that's how much offenses have progressed. Defenses always try to catch up. And, we see that coming and going. But I agree, the offensive have really changed a lot. And I think to the better.
Thank
Rich,
you.
You must not be able to remember to the single wing.
No, I don't remember the single week.
So, Brad Rice,
That's before my time.
Brad, I'd like to ask you, now you're starting to see the game from a father. You're starting to coach a son, and so you've seen the game evolve from when you played to now. So,
well, I'll add a couple of things. That spread offense, the zone read, I mean, that didn't exist 15 years ago, and so that's a big time difference and we're starting to see it filter down into the high schools and junior highs, and I've even seen some of the little 3rd and 4th, 5th grade teams starting to try to implement that. So I think that's rather interesting. And something else that Ryan kind of reminded me of is, I think we were very instrumental here at Idaho in getting a rule change in the game of football, and this is fresh in my mind because just the other day I watched the game. It's on. You can go out to YouTube and you can watch us beat Boise State in 1998. The televised game is recorded and it's on YouTube. And something that jumped out at me that I kind of had forgotten about from back in those days was the offense that we ran, and it was very instrumental in us winning that ball game and frankly winning the bowl game that year, was that when the huddle would break and the offense would be in the huddle and call the play and they'd break to go to the line, we would immediately substitute a whole different personnel grouping into the game at that time. So what Ryan talking about on defense, you see the players come out and you see the personnel grouping, and maybe it's 2 tight ends, maybe it's a single tight end, maybe it's no tight ends, it's 5 wide receivers, right? And you substitute your defense accordingly to try to match up with what the offense gives you. Well, if the offense breaks the huddle and they're running the line of scrimmage, but 3 wide receivers run off and 3 tight ends run on, and you get in some sort of a jumbo package to run the football, it's too late for the defense to substitute. And so I think it was the following year where the rule changed, where you couldn't do that anymore. And I think we had something to do with that.
So, Jake, Brian, you've been around the game now. What do you think? Have you seen how it's evolved?
Just really the speed of the game is, even being away from it for 3 or 4 years after I graduated and coming back to be a coach, just seeing how fast everything's happening. When you look at, I go back to high school, I think it was 2005, around the time Alex Smith was taken from Utah to play for the 49ers. They ran what everybody called the Utah spread, and that seemed to be kind of the start of the spread offense everyone's talking about, and they were very successful at it. So at my high school, our coaches adopted that, and unfortunately I wasn't the most fleet of foot. I never really have been, but we had players on our team that could execute that, and it really just stemmed off of the wing tee and all the other kind of wishbone offenses, and they just added that in with the shotgun and pretty much put an athletic quarterback in there that could make all the reads, and they train them the right way, and then it really put defenses in binds because no one had ever seen it before. It was so new. And then, when I came here, it was really, we were still under center, kind of a power offense, and we had, Mike Iapati, which was very helpful for pass protecting and run blocking, so that was nice, and a bunch of senior O-linemen and good running backs. So, we were really good at that. And by the time I was a senior, and we were barely ever in shotgun when I was a sophomore. By the time I was a senior, we were pretty much in shotgun the whole time. And we were trying to do tempo stuff. We even called a package NASCAR because NASCARs are fast. So everybody would think, okay, we're going NASCAR now. But it was so unfamiliar to us that it was kind of a struggle. But nowadays, offenses are just so fast. I mean, Oregon, look at them in their heyday. They got a playoff, was it every 21 seconds or something like that? And now that everybody seems to be doing that. Just talking to Ryan before this, it's like barely any teams are under center anymore, and that's just such a huge difference in just the speed of the game and getting plays in and out, signaling from the sideline. I'm sure you guys see coaches on the sideline holding up big boards with 4 different cartoon characters on it or something, and that somehow, by what the coaches are signaling to the players, those boards mean what the play is, and just the communication in the game, and it's just huge difference in that and the speed, communication. So,
yeah, I wish I could speak more to the schematic version from high school to college, because I played 8-man football. So coming to college, there was too many guys on the field for me. So it was really confusing. But like Brian said, the change in speed in offenses especially. You can see it. I kind of looked at the Sun Belt most recently, how when we just came in, when Idaho came into the Sun Belt, a lot of them were playing a lot of triple option or a lot of your power running type football, and Coach Petrino has brought in more of a more sophisticated offense, and you see it in every game. And now if you were to watch a lot of the other teams now, they're starting to copycat a lot of the stuff that we do, a lot of stuff that Idaho does well, throwing the ball down the field, great play action, stuff like that. So going between those two offenses, it's a copycat league as far as all of the conferences go. And one of the great constants in football has always been toughness. How tough are you? How well can you go from play to play? And no one's tougher than the older guys who could only sub twice in a game, but the best teams try to emulate that and try to keep that core value of being tough. And, whether you're more skilled or not than me, if I'm tougher than you and I have a better mindset, then I can be more successful than you. If I'm more of a a team player. If I'm a better team than you are, then we can do better on offense.
So, Brian Howard, I'd like to know, you were one of the few guys that had the opportunity to play in the NFL. So what was the change like coming from Idaho into the league? You know, all the players call, they're going to make the league. Well, this guy made the league. And so what was the big change there, and what was different about that?
I think at that time, there was a few guys in the league. You know, Ryan was in the league. Rick DeMoling was there. A couple other guys, I think, kind of. But so there was a big sense of pride. I was an undrafted guy. You know, I had to earn everything I got. I had to hustle. I had to work hard. So coming from Idaho, it was definitely a sense of pride to know that, you know, it was a smaller school. We didn't have a ton of guys that go. But, you know, I guess it was a fairly neat experience for me.
Yeah. So from my chair, what I see as a big change, how it's evolved, is how much time football players have to spend on their sport. And now they're really on our campus all summer. They go to summer school. You know, they have all kinds of time demands. And so, Rich and Dick, did you ever once tell us about your football season? Was it really like a 4 or 5 month season, and then you went on and did something else?
Yeah,
well, you know, Rob, the traveling with the team this past weekend opened my eyes a lot. And my grandson just finished playing for Montana, and then he finished his last year at Whitworth. And the time that was spent year-round, 12 months a year, is nothing, of course, like we had. Matter of fact, I don't even know if we had enough weights to call it a weight room that we had. And it's a 12-month process right now. Those kids are dedicated to football or dedicated to basketball or whatever it is that they're playing. And it's a 12-month deal. I mean, you aren't going to come and play football to get in shape. You better be in shape to play football. And that's one of the biggest things that I saw. Now, on the plane, when those kids are on the plane, I call them kids, listen to me. But they were kids, I guess, and my wife says, yeah, they're kids. Anyway, to see them on the plane with their laptops and with their notepads and studying their classes, but also interacting with the coaches, and the coaches were giving them tests as they were traveling on the plane, different alignments, different offenses, different defenses, what is your assignment, and so on. And it was very quiet on that plane. I have to tell you, I was impressed, very impressed with the whole squad, with the coaches and the entourage, which was, and when I say entourage, I can't believe how many folks that it takes to put on a football game anymore and to sustain a football program. We have no idea. We went back there to Missouri and the SEC, and they had 440 members in the band that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, that were on scholarship. They had a group of ladies that was called the Golden Girls that had their own building to work out in. I mean, it's just, you know, when you look at the difference in money spent and the difference in programs, there's a world of difference. And our kids held up well. They gave it their best, and I'm proud of them for doing it.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. So, Dick, you got to play 2 sports at Idaho, right?
Right, I did.
So football lasted how long and allowed you to go play another sport, right?
We came in usually 2 to 3 weeks before the season started. We went through 3-a-days at that time.
Full pads,
3-a-days, but once the season started, we went in just regular schedule and practice and go to school and come out. And we did not have a weight room at that time. We thought all weightlifters were bodybuilders, and didn't do that. So we had to come back in shape. The worst thing that happened to us, if we came back and hadn't been running and good, we got blisters. Oh man, that was the hardest thing I think on us coming back and starting. When you start stopping and going and stuff in your shoes and you got blisters, that was bad. But once the season was over, we were free. I mean, we had to go to class and everything else. We didn't have any weightlifting. We didn't have any exercising. We didn't have anything. Our season was over. And so when baseball started, I just started working out, playing baseball. The first year, I guess it was my sophomore year, I turned out for baseball. I just happened to come down in the Armory, and Wayne Anderson had the baseball team warming up there. It was in kind of January, February, and they were throwing and doing stuff. And Wayne had been my freshman football coach, and I said, "Hey," I said, "Coach, I used to play a little baseball. Think I could turn out?" And he said, "Oh yeah, go ahead, you turn out." So I turned out, and I made the team, and we actually were playing pretty good. We were in the Pacific Coast Conference, and we were playing Oregon State, Washington State, and Idaho. And it got around right time for spring practice, and Skip Staley comes to me and he says, "Hey, you're on a football scholarship. You can't be playing baseball during spring ball." And so first, Wayne tried to get me to, I'd come there, the games would start around 2 o'clock, baseball. So I'd come there and I'd put my baseball uniform, I'd go out and play 3 or 4 innings or 4 or 5 innings, jump in, spring ball start at 4, change into that uniform, run out and play football. You use different muscles and things, so it kind of got hurt. But after I went through that one spring ball, Skip allowed me to play baseball the rest of my career here, and so I was able to play football and baseball here at Idaho.
Jake Manley, you think that's possible this day and age to do something like that?
I mean, some athletes get to do it at some schools. You see some crossover between track and other sports. I mean, I'd love to get some track guys on the team or basketball players and vice versa. I think it makes you a better athlete. And the more things you can do, the more things you expose your body to, the more you can do on the field. So I love that aspect of it. The playing both ways, playing different sports. I think it just makes you a better football player in general.
So playing this game, the big topic of conversation out there is safety. So when I look at it, what we've evolved as athletic departments, and player safety is at a forefront. We talk about concussions. And so I would ask, are you concerned, any of you up here, about the long-term effects of, well, first of all, did you ever have concussions? And Dick, you may have had concussions, never were diagnosed. I don't say that. I say that in all truth.
I got to tell, I was telling Rod today, we must not have had concussions when I played, because Packy Boyle had smelling salts, and if you got dinged a little bit, you just took some smelling salts and went back on the field. So we didn't have concussions.
And so for those of you, Packy Boyle was one of our, probably the only athletic trainer we had. And now we look in our department, and we're probably understaffed, but we have, between graduate assistants and athletic trainers, we have 9 or 10 individuals in charge of all of our athletic training. Rich, you talked about the SEC. I thought it was interesting before the game. The Missouri team doctors came over to our bench to greet our team doctor, and it was they had 8 team doctors that came over, and we had our one, Steve Pennington, represented the Vandals proud. So, yeah, absolutely. So anyway, Ryan, you played. Did you? I mean, I don't know if it's a great question. Did you have a concussion ever?
I was never diagnosed with a concussion, but right now I work in medical sales, actually in neurology, so I get to talk to neurologists all the time, so I get free consults and whatnot. But honestly, there's not a lot that's known right now, but it is a concern. And the other thing that's a concern is not only concussions, but I mean there's a decent amount of data out there of just the repetitive hitting, and that can have, you don't technically have to have concussions. It can be smaller hits over time, and honestly, it's an area where we don't know a lot about. The brain is really complicated, and we seem to be moving into an era where we're collecting data and finding things out, but it's hard to even collect data, because one thing we found is that it's not just the G-force, that's a component, but it's the angles, and then sometimes that's not even. You can't even replicate that and get the same result in 2 different people. And we don't know exactly why, but it is definitely a concern. Not a whole lot I can do about it now, but actually the company that I work for, we're actually working on we have some early stage medicines that are called anti-tau medicines, and those are some of the things that you see in people that have some people that have had a lot of concussions or traumatic brain injury with soldiers and things like that. Over time, these tangles can happen in the brain, and so I'm kind of hopeful, and actually have talked to a couple of people in my company about reaching out to the NFL and Harvard have an agreement, and they're kind of in the beginning stages of trying to look into different medications. So I think it's a good thing. Hopefully we can find some things that can help down the road. Hopefully we can find some things out in the next few years about diagnosing it. When do we pull someone, for how long? What is it that we look for? I don't think we have those answers yet, but I think we're finally starting to move in that direction. I think the NFL for so long did do a poor job of it was just deny, and there's nothing here, nothing to see here, look the other way. I don't think they were, some people accuse them of knowing things that no one else knew and trying to hide it. I don't think it went that far. I just think it's a really complicated issue, and hopefully we can learn a little bit more and collect just a whole lot of data.
I really think that's terrific to be conscious of those injuries. And just like you were saying, people in the past would poo-poo them, and there really isn't anything the matter with you. You're good. Go back in there. But I think it's great what they're doing. I think it's needed. It's a long time coming, and we need to be real conscious of it, because there are long-term things that happen, injuries that happen. And I know a couple of my friends that have had trouble. One of them came back from Vietnam and had tremendous amount of brain injury from the defoliation during that time. And he played for the Vandals with me and played on the basketball team, and terrific receiver, a retired full bird colonel in the Special Forces, just passed away about 8 or 9 months ago. But I don't know how much of that was from playing or how much of it was from his service or whatever, but I'm really glad to hear you talk about the studies that are going on. It's really important. I had a grandson and a son that played football, and I was always very conscious of them. If they had any kind of head injury or anything like that, it wasn't poo-pooed. So I think that's terrific what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Rich. I look at what we're doing now as a department, and I think it's changed since Brian played, and I'm sure, Brad, since you played. But we have 3 baseline tests that we give every football player. There's 2 cognitive and 1 balance test. And then if they're diagnosed with a concussion, they have to pass all those tests before they can come back to play. And then they have to be symptom-free. And once they're symptom-free, they have to sit out for 5 days before they can come back into practice. Now, I'm sure that wasn't the case when you played. So I'm going to look to Brian Howard and Brad Rice here, who both have young children playing the game of football. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that football is going in a direction where it is more safe? Do you worry about the concussions?
Well, it's kind of interesting you asked the question. So I've got 2 boys, a 7th grader who's 12 and a 4th grader who's 9. And my 7th grader started and really wanted to play tackle football, so he started playing tackle football in 3rd grade. So he played 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. And I just had no intentions of allowing him to play tackle football because I thought, it's just not necessary at that young age, and I was very fearful of the head stuff going on, having no real knowledge as to what those long-term impact might be. And so I had a friend that had been through it with his own son, and kind of twisted my arm a bit to indicate that the contact at that level was minor, and that it could be controlled, and it was a lot of fun, and the kids enjoyed it, and there's some other aspects, like in terms of if those kids are passionate about that sport and they want to progress and keep up with the rest. If you miss out on those years of tackle football, you'll be set way back, and so I really wrestled with it because it's obviously a sport I love, and I think it's from a life lesson standpoint, it's incredibly valuable. So I said, well, if he's going to play, I'm going to coach so I can control the environment that they're in. And so very conscious of the head trauma aspect and really try to teach as best we can, keeping the head out of the tackle. When we do tackling drills, we line those kids up real close to one another. There's no big running starts, and to try to mitigate as much as you can the contact, because I think there are some studies out there that suggest that the younger you are when you start down that path, I mean, there's this compounding effect that can take place. And so, weighing all of those things, ultimately decided to allow my boys to play as long as I had the oversight and was there. And I can say through I guess 6 seasons now that I've coached at that level, in an entire season, you might see a couple of hits that are like significant enough to really take issue with or concern with. But as a general matter, the equipment's a lot better these days than it was, so that's helpful. But it's certainly on the mind. Very serious matter. I don't personally, I had a couple of concussions, but I don't think I've had any impact on me at this point. Now that said, I will tell you this, and everybody on the panel may want to use this. If my wife asks me to do something and I forget, I say CTE. CTE.
That's great. That's a good one.
Brian, how about you? You're involved in this right now, big time.
My son started football this year. Me and my wife Samantha, we decided to kind of keep him out. I didn't really start playing until 9th grade myself, so I felt like, if this was something he was going to enjoy and love, I kind of wanted him to do it on his own and kind of give me that, let me know that he wanted to do it. It wasn't me pushing him to do it. But, I've had concussions, and it is something I'm concerned about. It's kind of like Ryan said, it's the damage is done. If it's happened, it's happened. And but I think the way they're teaching kids to tackle these days, they're kind of calling it the rugby tackle, and it's way safer, and I appreciate that as a parent and as a coach. Anything we could do to help the kids be safer and try to avoid as many injuries as we can, I think it's a good thing. So,
thank you. So, Rob, I'll go back. I'm quite a little older than these guys, but when I started playing football in grade school, it was 2-hand touch, and then we got into, I guess, about 7th grade. Then we went to flag football, but we never went to contact football till we got to high school. And I think you learn your skills doing flag football or doing, and I think, I see some of this, and some of it was, as my kids were growing up, they got into it right away. That Optimus football and stuff in Boise and stuff. But not only was the injury thing that I didn't think was good, a lot of these kids just had parents that were out, I'm not saying this about you guys, but they were out there overseeing the kids doing it, but weren't teaching the kids. And it gave them a lot of bad habits. And I think I saw a lot of burnout in the kids starting to play football too young. And they get hurt a little bit, and they, why do I want to play this and stuff? So I don't know that I truly believe that I did right with my kids letting them go and play in Optimus football. I think they could have learned to play flag football or 2-hand touch, whatever. They learned the skills of throwing the ball and catching the ball and, and stopping people and stuff. So I worry about this concussion thing with the young kids and starting them so young and things. Maybe I'm just an old fogey now, but I think there's things to be looked at.
So now we've talked a little bit about the risks of football, maybe the bad things about football, but you talk to a lot of people that are passionate about it, and football may be considered the ultimate team game where you have to have 11 people operating in sync. So I'd like to hear from every one of our panelists about how has the sport of football impacted your life, and what have you been able to accomplish because of football? Rich?
Well, I'll start out, I guess. What hasn't it affected? That's the question I had in my mind. The sport of football, going through grade school, high school, and of course college, helped me work myself towards a degree in. I got a degree in teaching, education. no one in my family had a college education. So that's one achievement. But the game of football also taught me organization, discipline. I had to be on time. I had to be at a certain place. I had to own up to my own actions. I had to take responsibility for what I was doing or not doing. And it taught me many, many lessons in life. It taught me to work closely with other people, to give up of myself, of the I word, I. It was no longer, it was we, or us. It wasn't I anymore. And it taught me many, many skills. To come to the University of Idaho and to come to Moscow, Idaho, there were people that were Vandal boosters that I still see today. And Dean Vetras and Phillips Vetras, I still see them today. I love them. They help me get through school, help my wife and I get through. And I can't tell you enough of how the Vandal community is not just the University of Idaho, but it's the whole community of Moscow, Idaho helped us. They took us into their homes. They helped us when we were down and out. I mean, there were times when we had $10 or $12 in our pocket, and that was it. Now, nobody gave us any money, but they helped us get a job or whatever. And I can't tell you enough how much Moscow, Idaho, the University of Idaho, and the people at the University of Idaho helped us, and they're still helping us. We still love them. We sent our grandkids there, and we have such a terrific – I don't know how to say thank you enough. I can't say it enough. I can't express to you my feelings. I know Rob has seen my feelings before, haven't you, Rob?
Yes, I have.
But I have to tell all of you, thank you. Thank you for helping us. And I know you're going to help some other young man down the road make his wishes come true.
Thanks, Rich. So we're going to go from the audience's left to right here. And Brian, has football impacted your life? And do you think you've been able to accomplish anything because of that?
I mean, it's funny you spend 4 years at Idaho or 5, some guys, and 6 with others and 7 even. But, I think for such a short window of your life, it has so much impact on it. Some negative, but overwhelmingly positive. For me, I think the biggest takeaway is, hard work, just learning how to work through adversity. I mean, my 4 years here, I think we won 8 games total, and that was tough as a player. So what it teaches you is that, things in life are going to happen. Life sucks sometimes, but, to keep working hard and keep doing your best through it all. I mean, as a husband and a father and an employee, I mean, those are all lessons that can be translate very well into life. So.
Thanks. Brad?
Well, I serve on the school board in Lewiston, and I've just always thought this, and I will say it from time to time on the school board, is that there's no better classroom than a football field, and I really believe that because the lessons that you learn in a team sport like football that is a very physical game far exceed anything you might learn in a classroom. And so you have to experience that to know exactly what I'm talking about, and I think everybody on this panel could certainly relate. But what separates successful people in this world, and there's lots of studies on this, is the concept of having passion and perseverance. And what that really means is having grit. True grit is what differentiates the successful versus the not as successful or unsuccessful. And that's really what football is all about in my mind, is learning those lessons of, if you're going to be successful, you have to persevere. Toughness has been mentioned. In 1998, when we won the conference and won the bowl game, the theme that whole year was 2 words: toughness and believe. And we had T-shirts, and our bowl rings say toughness and believe, which to me is grit, right? And that those things, if you can come together and learn to work together and persevere and go through all the tough times and sacrifice and plan and prepare and all of those things, it correlates perfectly well with success in life. I mean, success on the field because if you do all those things, and you can be successful in life. And so, I think Rich said it well that what part of my life doesn't it impact? Because ultimately, it's a big part of who I am internally in terms of what it's taught me and the character that it's built in me. But at the same time, it's also really helped me in life develop relationships. It's always nice coming back to Moscow because I have so many relationships that were developed purely through football. Lots of faces in the crowd that are very familiar. And so that part's really special to me because another aspect of being successful in life is learning how to develop relationships. And when you're thrown into a team sport at this institution anyway, you're kind of forced on you to get to know people and develop relationships. So yeah, very important in my life.
Dick? I too was the first in my family to get to go to college and to graduate from college. And so I would say the first thing that I really got out of football was an opportunity to get an education. And the second thing I got was the camaraderie of the people you played with, that you got to know in school, and how you handled it. One of the greatest things about football is the competitiveness. And I don't care what business you go into, whether you're a laborer or what you are, you've got to compete against the people in your industry or in your job to be the best. And if you're going to be a good football player, you have to compete and you have to play, and you have to play with an adrenaline. And I think I was, as you can tell, I was not very big. I was about 5'8" and 160 pounds when I was playing ball. But I love the game and I love to compete. And then I think it not only helped me through school and through my education, but it helped me all through my career in business and such that I've done before. Now.
I think the best way to put it, since I started playing football when I was a freshman in high school, I've never been to war, in another country or anything like that, but I have been to war with my brothers on a football field every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, anytime I strapped on the pads and went to war with those guys. You really are trying to defeat the other team in all aspects. And the brotherhood that you get from day one of fall camp and spring ball, from that all the way through the end of the season and back to it, you're doing everything you can to become one unit, to become a brotherhood, to just beat everybody you play. My best friends are all ex-football players really now. My brother's a football player. We see eye to eye on a lot of things. Everybody I've run through this game has really changed my life, and I can tell you this for sure. If I would have decided to play baseball, it's a very individual sport, I wouldn't be where I am today. The fact that I got to strap on those pads with those guys every single day, I wouldn't change that for anything. And you really learn a lot about yourself in those high stressful situations when you trying to beat somebody else and you got your 10 other guys on the field with you and your 60 other guys on the team, if you're lucky enough in high school to have that many guys on your team, Jake. But you can't replace that. And how it's affected my life, I've got a whole bunch of really good friends out of it. Being able to come to this school, I was a walk-on at one point at a different school. I played junior college for a little bit. And then I was fortunate enough after junior college to come here and get my education. Met my wife, who's here tonight, Jill right there. So everything, and I fortunately got to come back and be a graduate assistant, thanks to Dr. Spear, and got to get my master's, and now I have a full-time job. So pretty much everything from the day I started playing football has led to this point in my life, and I wouldn't change it for anything in the world.
Well, I think a lot of people start playing football for whatever different reasons, but the first reason I started to play football was as an outlet. There's not a lot of things in today's society where you can just can go hit people. You don't get to do it anymore. So when I was a kid and growing up, it was always a great outlet for me for just emotionally and physically and being able to have an outlet for that. And it's turned into having a great education. I wouldn't have went to college if it wasn't for football. If I didn't want to play football in college, I had a lot of firsts. The first African American I ever talked to was here in Moscow, Idaho. Being from small town Riggins, we don't get a lot of diversity. And then getting that family, camaraderie is just, it's unique to football. You don't get it in any other things. Brian mentioned the military. They're probably there, but I still have friends from then that always have, and I've got an opportunity to come back and coach. From my playing days. Thankfully, thanks to Dr. Spear and Coach Petrino, I'm going to get my master's and hopefully go on and coach. And there's just miles and miles of reasons and things that football has been able to give me that I'm very thankful for.
I'm trying to think of what I can add to these guys because all those are great points. I think for me personally, growing up, I was kind of a person, a kid who things happened to. I was a pretty quiet, pretty shy kind of kid, and grew up in just a suburban household. I was the first person in my family too to go to school, so that was kind of cool. But my family didn't know what to expect. I don't know if they had super high expectations. They were just excited that they had somebody going to college. And for me though, like I was saying, I was somebody that things happened to. I didn't really take the bull by the horns, and that's like Brad was alluding to, important if you want to be successful in life, and that's exactly what football taught me, especially coming here. The tough thing was, I remember when I got recruited to University of Idaho, and I came here and I decided to come here. Before that, your football team was kind of decided by your geography in your hometown, and then your high school. Okay, you want to play? Well, this is where you're playing. And now it's like I had a few different schools to choose from out of high school. I'm like, Ryan, you're gonna have to make a decision. And so that's part of being successful is compiling the information. What do you want? Okay, make a decision, go after it, and that's something my coaches taught me and football taught me was, okay, you got to make decisions, you got to come up with a plan, you've got to look at your strengths, who you're going against, their weaknesses, some different things of what are you, how are you going to come at this? What angle are you coming at? So it taught me really to think strategically, and really make decisions and go after it, and then be persistent and put in the hard work and all these things that these guys said. So that was a huge thing for me in my life because it kind of took me out of my natural rut of what I was going to be, and showed me, hey, you don't have to be born like, there's some natural born leaders out there that are bam, know as soon as they come out of the womb what they want to do, and I wasn't one of those guys. But football kind of told me that, hey, you can do it if you want to. You just need to work hard and overcome some different things and grind away. So that's kind of what football did for me in a nutshell.
Yeah, great stuff. So at this point, I could ask questions all day, but I wonder if anybody out there in the audience has a question they're dying to ask this great panel. Putting everybody on the spot here. Kathleen.
On NPR today, there was a show this morning on how there's a lot of talk about people being paid to play football in the NFL, and that is it time to pay college football players, because as you referenced earlier, college goes all year now, and it's not just a season sport. So I don't know how much traffic that's getting. I don't know if it's a different level of school system. I don't know where that's coming from.
Great question, Rich. Were you able to hear that question?
I couldn't quite hear.
Basically, should we be paying college football players? So open it up. What would like to?
Well, as a college football player that was married during his sophomore year, and my wife worked fortunately down there at the She worked at the Varsity Cafe. Anybody know where the Varsity Cafe was down there?
There's a new Varsity Cafe or Varsity Diner.
Yeah, and then she ended up working at First Security Bank, which you all know where that is. But, I think our jock check, we called it a jock check, it was a $15 gross. We got $14.52 a month. And my job was to swab the deck of the pool twice or three times a week for my jock check. And just to let you know how far that went, we're able to fill up the Renault, buy a pizza, and go to a movie for $15. So do they need to get paid? Yes, I think they need to be compensated. When you see the TV contracts that are in the millions of dollars and the university is profiting from their work, I think they have to be paid something. I mean, maybe their jock check is $1,500 instead of $15. I don't know. The problem that you get into is that each league is going to do something different, and you're going to be competing against pay as opposed to what you can offer at the university. And I think that's okay, I guess, but I know it takes the purity out of the game, doesn't it?
Brian Reeder, you had a comment.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to be a player when I say Mike Iupati came back. I'll reference him again. As most people know, he was drafted, I think, 11th overall?
16th.
16th
Right.
overall in the NFL draft. And his one message to us, I was a junior at the time, and I've actually been able to hear him as he's come back since I've been a coach. His one message is always the same. Enjoy college while you have it. Enjoy what you're doing right now, because you'll never have, as I referenced earlier, you'll never have this brotherhood again. I didn't play in the NFL, but I played in a league where he did get paid. And when you start adding money into an athlete's career, the one thing that's constant is the love of the game drops immensely. People start playing for the money instead of playing for the love. And I think the purity of football really takes a huge hit when you start paying people for something instead of just playing because you love the game. I mean, that's why we started playing football. I could probably say for everybody on here. You play football because you love it. You keep playing football this far into your career because you love it. And I think, to be honest, everybody who does have a scholarship at a Division I or Division II, any university is fortunate that they actually get to be given an education, more or less. They don't have to pay any money and they get their education, which sets them up for a lot of success later in life.
I agree.
Other comments?
I think it'd be great to see, someone mentioned TV contracts. I think it'd be great to see some kind of fairness involved in the distribution of those funds. When it comes to separate teams, when it comes down to paying players, and I don't know if that's the answer, but to see some kind of a fairness between, a trickle down between the NCAA and all your different conferences, and so where there's still a competitive aspect to where we're not competing with Alabama to pay certain players, and so when there's just some kind of a fairness there would be good.
I'd just comment on what Brian said. Something else that compounds it is the youth and immaturity, of paying an 18, 19, 20-year-old. So that compounds the issue. That said, considering the demands these days on the kids, it would be very interesting to pencil out the value of the scholarship based on the value of the number of hours that are put in, and if one was trying to make it somewhat more equitable, if that student was putting in that same number of hours working, whether it was minimum wage or any other wage, just to see how it shakes out, I'd be real curious, because maybe there's a happy medium where it's not big money, but it's certainly compensating for the amount of time that they're putting in.
I think that's a great idea. Having something like that's an awesome idea. You don't see a lot of Ivy League players complain about not being paid. It's a lot of your big schools. So I think you have to have that aspect of education and with your players.
Yeah. So I just would ask what you see as the role of the arts in football, because we have kind of like an artistic display of some of the heritage of football. So I just thought that would be kind of a
Rich, an interesting question on the role of the arts in football.
Yes.
So that was the
Well,
question.
I just saw where the Cougars are dropping performing arts. Did you see that?
Did not see that.
Yeah. To balance their budget, they're going to drop performing arts, and which I think is a tragedy. I believe in participation at all levels, everybody. We went to the University of Missouri, and we're standing on the sidelines, and there's 14 to 20 cheerleaders and cheer guys. There's 440 people in the band. There's the Golden Girls. I don't know how many people were there. The staff, the photography groups, just on our plane, there were folks that all their assignment was to take care of the equipment, which is a big assignment. And so I think participation, whether it's flag waving or singing, I love songs. I love music. The best talk I ever gave at a pregame thing was I had the band play our fight song. I mean, you cannot give a better speech than the fight song. So I really believe that we need to have everybody participate at all levels, all degrees, male, female, whatever. We need to have participation. They don't need to have time on their hands. Believe me, I taught for 11 years, and I saw the waste of many, many lives because they didn't have something to do. So whether it's tiddlywinks or the math club or the chess club or whatever it is, people need to belong to something. They need to feel wanted. They need to achieve in a different avenue than what they've been doing all day long. It's very important to participate.
I agree, and the band that was one thing, going to the NFL. It's just like, okay, there's all these neat things, right? The stadiums are bigger, and you're in these big cities, and you're playing against these other guys that are really good at what they do. But it's like so there's a lot of things that are added, but it's like, well, there's something missing, and it's like the band. I mean, other than I think the Washington Redskins have their band, and they've had it forever. But other than that, there's no other team that has the band, which is great. I always loved the homecoming covers, those kind of artwork. I think that kind of just takes that year, that moment, that season, and freezes it in time, and you can look back. And I love the artwork. I saw some of them out around the corner, the old covers. I like the one with it has the Idaho, Washington State, where it has the cougar and the Vandal kind of staring each other down.
Oh yeah, those are great.
Other comments there? That's an interesting question. It's one that I've used. A little history. I went to faculty senate back in the day. It was faculty council actually back in the day. It's now faculty senate. And I left there one day and came out of there and said, these people have no idea about the value of athletics. And I think tonight you got to hear about the value that athletics contributes. And the one thing that I always put, I have like 8 different bullet points of the value of athletics, and one is we support the arts. We support the arts because our band, on a given Saturday, like they will this Saturday, will get to perform, and their talents will be showcased in front of a lot more people than they would otherwise be able to perform in front of, and dance teams and cheerleaders and all those things. So we do have, in my opinion, a way to impact the arts.
I've never seen, I don't know if you guys saw, we're at the App State game, when the referees actually stopped the game and said, the band, this is the band's first and only warning. They cannot play when the offense is in formation. And the band leader took, his sheet music and started throwing one sheet, like taunting the ref to throw the flag. And he took sheet after sheet, about 10 sheets, threw them up in the air, and I just thought that was great.
That was great. That was great. Yeah. That was great.
Well, the one thing
referee made him stop.
Yeah, one thing I would like to ask all of our panelists here and all of them to contribute to this is, what does it mean to be a Vandal? What does it, we have this great Vandal traditions, and I want to thank the Arts Commission for doing this, and it allowed me to really go back in our history a little bit, and it is a wonderful history, but I just want to know, what does it mean to you to be a Vandal?
Well, to be a Vandal means that you're identified with one of the major universities in the nation. And you're also identified with one of the major support communities in the nation, the Moscow City group. Also, you're identified with the best booster group that I know of. I've been around a few of them. And the group that we have that support the University of Idaho Vandals. To be a Vandal, and my wife's a Vandal, my grandchildren are Vandals. We've got a couple great-grandchildren that are warming up to go. So we're proud to be a Vandal. They took care of us. They took us into their arms, and we'll never forget it. We'll never forget it the rest of our life. We just hope and pray that there are other young people that get the opportunity that the Vandals gave us.
Ryan, what does it mean to be a Vandal?
I think if you listen to Coach Petrino in any interview, I think he sums it up pretty good. And you hear him say words grind, and things like lower, longer, harder. And to me, I think that's what it means to be a Vandal. I think there's some athletes out there, some kids, whoever have the mindset of, I'm going to go to, a really big school and hopefully hit a run and get lucky on a couple catches and look good, and then get my shot and then go on from there or whatever football-wise. I don't think that is the case at all with Idaho, and you'll hear Coach Petrino is very humble about the football team. He says we have to work. We're grinders. He goes, most of the time when we line up against teams on Saturday, they're bigger, and we have, but you see him do it, year in, year out, where they'll go against some of these teams, and like South Alabama was a good example. And those guys, I saw them last year when they came here. I was walking into the Dome as they were getting off the bus, and I was just like, holy cow, these guys look like a second-string NFL team. They were big guys, and beat them that year and then beat them this year. There are a lot of players. So and that was one thing when I was here. We cherished kind of being an underdog, and I think that's what it means to me. Just like we're going to have to fight for whatever we get, and we welcome that fight, and that's what we want. We want to be in that position because it's so much sweeter, when you do the thing that people say you can't. And for me, I turned down 2 Pac-10 scholarships to come to University of Idaho. And a lot of my friends and my family thought it was crazy. Oh, you could go to these big Pac-10 schools, and just something clicked when I came here, and I said, no, I want to be a Vandal. And so I kind of cherished being the underdog the whole time. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's I had the choice between going to Idaho and Boise State, being from the middle in Riggins, and I debated about it. I talked to my coach in high school about it, and he said it's one thing to go to a place and be successful. It's another thing to go to another place and help make it successful. So being a part of that, being an underdog, and having to work for everything that you get that means a lot, and that's something you can have pride in. That's something I think all Vandals have a lot of pride in.
That's actually exactly what I was thinking, something we say, and a lot of schools probably say this too, but we break down with Vandal pride all the time. Being a Vandal, we have such a close-knit family, especially in the athletic department, you see it. I think family is a huge word you can use as a Vandals. Players, all of our athletic department, as far as teams are concerned, we all walk through the same buildings, so you see the same faces every single day. From other schools you hear about, the baseball team never even runs across the football team or the women's volleyball team or anything like of that nature. So really, to me, the term Vandal is family and Vandal pride, because those are the two things I've known about being a Vandal since I got here back in 2009.
I guess when I think about being a Vandal, I think of things that happened to me in coming to this school, and then things that happened to me while I was here. One of the things is when I was being recruited, and I came here in the fall of the year, and I walked up Hello Walk, and you could have told me I was going to Harvard or Princeton. There was nothing more beautiful than going up through that campus. Some of the other things that happened to me that makes me really proud to be a Vandal. My senior year, fortunately, I got to be a captain on homecoming, and it was we were playing San Jose, and they were going in to score, and we were ahead. But anyway, I intercepted a ball, and we won the game and stuff. But really, the thing that was most important to me that day is my folks who had never gone to college or anything were here, and being that I was the captain that day, they took my folks up and he sat with Dr. Theophilus in the booth, and the president, yeah. And after the game, my dad always came into the locker room, and most of the players knew him and everything, and he would be talking to us and stuff. And he came in that day, and I'll never forget it. He said, "By God, boys, I got to sit with the principal today." But being a Vandal, they were part of our family. There was another incident with Dr. Theophilus, and this doesn't do with football, but I was selected to play in the Pan American Games in 1963, play baseball. And it was in my my fifth year, and I was looking to graduate, but I needed to get the last semester out of the way. Well, I got a call on the phone. The guy says, "Do you want to go to Brazil?" And I think, Brazil? I said, "What is it, Peace Corps or what?" And, I was trying to make excuses why not to go. But then he said, "No, you've been selected." It was Art Reichel was a coach at UCLA. And anyway, so I said, I need to make sure I can graduate and stuff and still go and play. And this was like in February, and we were going to go in March and April to play. And so then I thought about that night, and I got up the next morning, and I walked to the administration building, and I went right into Dr. Theophilus's office and asked the secretary if I could see the president. And she kind of said, "Well, what do you want to see him?" And I said, "Well, I need to talk to him." And so she took me into the president, and I said, "Doctor, this is a situation I'm in." I said, "I have this opportunity to go to Brazil and play in these Pan American Games, but I need to graduate. I need to go to work. I've been in school. This was 5 years." And he kind of looked. He had kind of a slender little guy, and he kind of a cranky face, and he just looked across the table or the desk at me, and he said, "You go," he says, "you represent the state of Idaho and the University of Idaho. You let me worry about the grades." He said, I made the dean's list. But I got to tell you, this school is like family to me. And I tell my wife every week when we drive up to a game, when I start up over that hill out of Lewiston and coming into Moscow, the hair on the back of my neck starts standing up. I mean, this is family here. The University of Idaho is my family. Yeah.
Brad, what's it mean to be a Vandal?
Yeah, being part of the tribe, right?
Yeah.
Really, and those of us that played football, I mean, there's two families. There's your brothers that you played with and got to know, and then there's the alumni, because I kind of looking at it from two parts. I mean, I've got my family, those that I bled and sweat with and grew that bond with, but one of my just cherished things was so sacred to me about our institution is it's a big family, but it has that small town culture to it. And what I mean by that is I'm sure other institutions would say something similar about the family, but I can go to a Vandal function anywhere in this state, and invariably I will find somebody that I know, and if I don't know somebody, we can talk for 2 or 3 minutes, and we have all kinds of connections, and the spider web is really vast, and that just adds to the whole experience as far as being part of the family, part of that tribe, and I really value that. I look forward to going to Vandal functions because I can mix and mingle in a group like this, and everybody, there's just kind of that unspoken love, and so it is really, truly like family.
For me, I think it's words we've heard just now. It's like it's grit, it's hard work, it's family, it's teamwork. But more than that, I think for me, it's the university and being a Vandal is so tied to the city of Moscow, and it's such a neat community. It's such a neat town that kind of rallies around the team and the university. And last year me and my wife had a career change, and we could have moved anywhere, and we chose Moscow because, it was special to me being a Vandal and coming back here. So it's a special place to me. Obviously, I'm raising my kids here, and, it's a special place.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I want to thank our panelists. I thought it was wonderful, and you see what a great representation the University of Idaho has with this great panel. So thank you for being here tonight. Thanks, Rich.